3, 3, 4, 4, 5, 5, 5, 5. Cool. One. If I can just get the panelists on stage, we'll just do a mic check before doors open. So that is Brett, Matt, and Paul, if you please. Just grab a seat and feel free to chat amongst yourselves for a little bit.
tonight. So, thank you. Thanks, Sally. It is great to be in this place, and I'm looking forward to the night. The word that we have on the screen there is Waminjiko or Waminjiko, depending on how heavy your accent is. And in Aboriginal languages are very efficient, economical and nuanced. So the one word can mean a couple of things. So that means welcome, but it also means why are you here? And so, it sounded like a school principal, didn't I? Why I'm here is I'm very excited about tonight. In the knowledge exchange that happened on this country for tens of thousands of years, it was measured by two criteria: whether your mind was stretched and your spirit stirred. Tonight we're going to have both those things occur, but I want to, in the spirit of Aboriginal knowledge, put to you the word boundary. Now, for a long period in this country, every country town had a boundary road, and that was the demarcation line that blackfellas weren't allowed to cross. We have the former President of the United States who wanted to put a wall up at boundaries. However, in our knowledge system, you went to the boundaries to exchange knowledge. You left all your securities and you went away, and at the boundaries, at the edge, that's where new knowledge presided. That's where you push the boundaries, you nudge the paradigms, and you examine the sensibilities. And I'm sure that's what's going to happen tonight. So with your indulgence, let's acknowledge the great Wurundjeri people whose language Woiwurrung we have up there on the board. And as we meet on their homelands, Narn, let us pay respect to their ancestral spirits who got us all here safe tonight, and we implore that they'll get us home safe at the end of this event. And to the elders, past, present and emerging. This is an event where I'm going to ask you to leave the safety of your paradigm, move to the edge, have your mind stretch, your spirits stirred. And if we've got Russel Howcroft anywhere near this event, that's going to happen automatically. Welcome to this country.
Russ is rushing me. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Rhys Hayes. I am the Managing Director of the Private Office, Chairman of IE Company, and tonight, most importantly, of the very proud co-founder of The Grid. I'd like to begin by reading the very pertinent statement from our partner and host venue for the evening, being the State Library, and join with them in acknowledging the traditional landowners of all Victorian Aboriginal clans and their cultural practices and knowledge systems. The library recognises that their collections hold traditional cultural knowledge belonging to Indigenous communities in Victoria and around the country. The library supports communities to protect the integrity of this information gathered from their ancestors in the colonial period. And we pay our respects to their elders, past, present, who have handed down these systems of practice to each new generation for millennia. It is in fact these systems of practices that inform us that this place, this country, has been a site of continuous innovation and invention for a millennia or more. And so, it's in the spirit and sentiments of Professor Mark, and standing on the shoulders of the giants of this enormous history, we find ourselves again building community, testing boundaries and sharing knowledge to enable the very best in each other. Welcome to The Grid. Of course, we would not be here without the support of so many, none more so than the Victorian Government, and therefore it's my privilege to welcome to the stage the Minister for Trade, Minister for Industry Support and Recovery, and the Minister for Tourism, Sport and Major Events, amongst others in a very busy portfolio, the Honourable Martin Pakula.
Thanks very much for that kind introduction, and thanks to Mark Rose for that wonderful welcome to country. And I just want to join and adopt his words and the spirit of in the spirit of self-determination and treaty, and thank him for being here tonight. I'd also like to acknowledge the Lord Mayor, Sally Cap, who I think you'll hear from soon, to the indomitable Russel Howcroft, co-founder of The Grid, to Kate Kornick, the CEO of LaunchVic, and I acknowledge Kate particularly because I think LaunchVic is going to play such an incredibly important role in so much of what everyone in this room wants to do, and I think her ambitions and those of The Grid very much align. And our commissioners, who I think are joining us virtually, Michelle Wade, who's our Commissioner to South Asia, Tim Dillon, our Agent General in the UK and Commissioner for Victoria to Europe and Israel, and Nigel Warren, our Commissioner, one of our Commissioners to the Americas, who focuses on the West Coast, including Silicon Valley and Latin America. And look, there are many other people I could acknowledge. I should, of course, I think I will pay special mention to Ganusa Best from Global Victoria, who's worked so closely with Russell on pulling tonight together. I think it's self-evident that we are back and open for business as a city and as a state. And the launch of The Grid tonight is just another sign that we are ready to recover and ready to thrive, and our events expertise is just one part of that. I understand that you'll hear from our Trade and Investment Commissioners later this evening on the Fourth Industrial Revolution and the technology opportunities that that revolution provides for Victoria. And I was just talking to Kate Kornick before we started about how much innovation has occurred and been driven both through and because of the pandemic. And I think we are very, very well placed to capitalise on that. And we are very pleased to support this event and be part of the important discussion that I think it will precipitate about our future. I just want to speak briefly, this is not all about major events, but I do want to speak briefly about the way that we are opening back up to the world, because it is partly about events. It's about bringing our international visitors back through flights. It's about international students coming back in increasingly strong numbers. We had a couple of weeks ago the Formula One Grand Prix, which is, apart from being a major sporting event, a great centre of innovation, and the involvement of organisations like RMIT in it for many years, I think, are testament to that. But that attracted record crowds, the biggest crowd we've ever seen for any Formula One event anywhere in the world. We've hosted an amazing comedy festival. We've provided $100 million in stimulus vouchers to get Victorians out and about. But beyond those events, we are working really hard to attract major investments into the state. We want to be a destination of choice for global companies, and to support them and the advanced manufacturing, the innovation, the ecosystems that can be built up around those companies. So Moderna, as you would know, have announced that they will open manufacturing facilities and a research centre here. We will be the first place in the Southern Hemisphere to manufacture mRNA vaccines, and the opportunities that come with that, I think, are limited only by our imagination. It adds to what is really a booming medtech sector, with recent investments by Compumedics, by 3D Meditech, hello Paul Doherty, Lumos Diagnostics in partnership with Planet Innovation. There are so many medtech companies which have decided to make Melbourne home, and that is a consequence of our amazing graduates. It's a consequence of the fact that we've got incredible research facilities, but it's also a consequence of government being focused on that sector and understanding that it is an important part of job creation, and good, not just jobs, but good jobs with good wages and great skill development that will help to buttress our future. Manufacturing continues to be an incredibly important sector in our state. We've got companies like Nissan Casting, Bosch Australia, Hanwha, either investing for the first time or reinvesting in Victoria. We've got the largest network of overseas offices of any state in the nation. We've just announced that we are going to open another one in Paris, because we want to help exporters connect to global opportunities, and we understand that with the United Kingdom leaving the EU, running our trade and investment strategy from London for all of Europe is no longer appropriate. We think there are huge opportunities on the continent, and we think that office in Paris will be a very important part of us capturing them. In terms of transformation, we are really committed to supporting business growth and expansion. The budget that the Treasurer handed down just last week allocated $40 million for the Victorian Industry Investment Fund. That is a fund to support companies in sectors like health, but also food production, technology, advanced manufacturing, and also business services to develop more of their products here locally. Advanced manufacturers will also benefit from $20 million in the budget to invest in low carbon component manufacturing and to help other manufacturing workers transition into high skilled digital jobs. And of course, last year the Premier and Treasurer announced that there was $2 billion in the Breakthrough Victoria Fund supporting innovation in advanced manufacturing and digital technology. So, you know, whether it's about bringing students back into the country, whether it's about opening our state up to events again, whether it's about ensuring that we get our share of visitation through international flights and our share of the freight opportunities that come with that, whether it's about helping companies to invest in Victoria for the first time or building particular sectors which we're focused on, all of that is part of the agenda, and I think every element of that is something that will be focused on by the Grid either this year or in years to come. So I want to congratulate Russell on his vision for the Grid. He certainly raised this with me many months ago, probably more than a year ago now, and to see it come to fruition is certainly very encouraging. It is providing a platform for businesses to reconnect locally and globally and to continue the conversation about Victoria's place in the world, and I very much look forward to hearing about the outcomes of tonight's event. So thanks very much for having me and good luck.
Thank you so much, Minister. It's terrific to have you join us this evening. It's really appreciated. Now can you join me in welcoming to the stage the great leader of this great city and its #1 champion for renewal, our Lord Mayor, Sally Capp.
Thank you so much. How good is this? We are here for Melbourne Knowledge Week, and it is the Grid Presents event this evening, and it is an honour to be here with Minister Pakula welcoming you all for this important conversation. Well, Nam Nagu is Melbourne Knowledge Week 2020, and I do say thank you as well to Professor Mark Rose for the welcome to country. On behalf of the City of Melbourne, we acknowledge the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung people as the traditional owners of the land that we're meeting on this evening, and the fact that this has been an important meeting place for them for tens of thousands of years as one of the longest continuous living cultures in the world. What's very special for us this year at the City of Melbourne with Knowledge Week is that working with the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung, we've been given permission to dual name this festival of ours, which is Nam Nagu, Melbourne and Knowledge together. And I do apologise, I'm still learning how to say these words properly, but I'm really honoured that we are allowed to use these words from the traditional language of the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung people. We have 4 themes as part of the Knowledge Week Nam Nagu Festival, and the one that this event tonight fits into is called Paran, which means way. And that was chosen for the technology stream of this festival. And I think that sense of the way forward is brilliant and adds a lot of value to the way that we are engaging with our traditional owners throughout this festival. Well, we're all here tonight, you're here tonight because you recognise, as we do, that we are competing in a fast-changing and increasingly competitive global market. Like us, you know that innovation and digital technologies are major drivers of prosperity and progress and have the power to transition our economy and our broader community. Wow. The Industry 4.0 is affecting almost every sector. And Melbourne and its community, we are adapting quickly, and I absolutely endorse those comments from Minister Pakula about what we've seen, and Kate, you've been observing and leading that in the way that we've embraced technology over the last couple of years. That sense of adapting quickly with technology and driving innovation, accelerating it at a rapid rate is exactly where we need to be. That's the slipstream for Australia into the future. But we also know that it's not just technology for technology's sake, and I hope the conversation tonight really brings that curiosity, the creativity and the challenging that we need to make sure that we are developing and using technology to result in something that is of value for all of us. We are constantly exploring the possibilities that technologies present and the ways in which they can enhance and simplify and stretch the way that we live our lives and the way that our city functions. And they're the sorts of conversations that we want to have. We know that technology can strengthen our economic competitiveness on a global scale, and the conversation tonight will certainly lead us there. But it is the new industries and creating the next generation jobs and technologies that we have the opportunity to lead here in Melbourne. We want to and we must. The most exciting emerging technology for us at the City of Melbourne is certainly around the green tech sector. I've already had one really interesting conversation tonight about that. Our new Power Melbourne project is about establishing a network of community scale or neighbourhood scale batteries to create an independent network for renewable energy across our city. And we believe this will rally a wave of innovation, of R&D, of jobs and training. And all of this must be led by tech. And that's exciting to us. Of course, these aspirations that we have, the aspirations that you all have as members of our community, need to be turbocharged. And it is people like Russel Howcroft and it is projects like The Grid that are going to really push us forward. Hopefully we like it, but if we don't, the prod that we need now and then to really create change is exactly what this event tonight, what The Grid as a concept, as an organisation and as a future series of not just events but outcomes will deliver for Melbourne. And we're really pleased to be involved in The Grid as it incubates great ideas for us as individuals, but importantly, as I said, turns them into great realities. No pressure, Russ. We're there with you. I'm here tonight with many of my fellow councillors, including Deputy Lord Mayor Nicholas Rees. It is a mouthful and I haven't had a drink yet. And on behalf of all of the councillors, we thank you all for being part of and interested in and leading world-class expertise, for listening to the international experts this evening, and then for working with us to deliver those incredible realities. And without further ado, it is time finally to hear from the team at The Grid. Thank you.
Lord Mayor, we genuinely thank you for your leadership and stewardship over an incredibly difficult period. It's terrific. Thank you. The Grid has been a journey of commitment, as I suggested before, envisioned prior to the pandemic and made stronger by its devastating impact on the city and the state that we all love. We set ourselves a challenge way back then to conceive an event of global significance that puts Melbourne on the world stage as a destination for innovation and the future of business. And with that challenge in mind, we arrived at a mission to accelerate the world's great ideas into action. And a vision of a world where ideas that can advance humanity find their way to the resources that can make them a reality efficiently, effectively and compassionately. We'll achieve this by cultivating a global community of future leaders, connecting to each other and to the capital and resources that drive action, outcomes and meaningful renewal. Make no mistake, we stand at the dawn of a decade like no other in human history, one that will shape the future of generations to come. There is little doubt that the next 10 years will change the face of society, of business, the economy and the geopolitical landscape. Not to mention, it'll be the decade of reckoning when it comes to tackling the most significant negative implications of climate change. But we can lean into these challenges armed with knowledge, connection and resource to reshape the world for the better. And concurrently, we believe that Melbourne and Victoria is at the dawn of its next youth renaissance, providing fertile soil for its remaking as a global destination of choice for leadership, innovation and investment. And that the grid, through its community, can energise and empower that very outcome. Specifically, we're manifesting the grid's vision through the design, development and delivery of a program of hybrid, online and real-world events that will cultivate connection in pursuit of action. With the marquee of this program set to be Melbourne's next major event of international significance, the Grid Festival of Ideas to Action. Bringing to life the Grid's mission in the most manifest way is the commitment to act. A pledge that we invite all participants in our community to undertake. It's a simple commitment to take action in the name of the advancement of the individual, yourself, or another, the idea, your organisation, or the wider community. As we scale both our technology and our community, we will evolve the commitment to act and actively stay connected as they emerge into impactful reality. The scale and significance of the collective action will ultimately be published in an annual report, the Global Commitment to Act Impact Report. So tonight, I'd like to invite you to pull out your mobile phones, if you haven't yet, and scan the QR code behind me, and join us in a symbolic gesture as the very first to commit to act. And tonight, together, in support of Melbourne and its future as a leading city in the fourth industrial revolution. Of course, we already have all your email addresses, so fear not. We can already send you spam, but we won't. And in actual fact, this show of support, as I said, is symbolic for us. It's the beginning of a journey. We are a startup ourselves. And what we will commit to deliver back is we will provide you with the prospectus we've developed for the funding and planning of the grid, and invite you all into our co-design process. The grid is infrastructure for everybody, and therefore we need everybody's support in the design and development of that infrastructure. So before I invite Russell to the stage, I need to thank a couple of people. In fact, so many it would take the rest of the night. But in particular, our hosts here, the magnificent State Library of Victoria, whose chair will be joining Russell on stage this evening. And of course, acknowledge that tonight we are part of Melbourne Knowledge Week, the City of Melbourne's marquee event for knowledge sharing, and that sits at the very heart of what we do in our partnership. Our evolving partnership with Melbourne Knowledge Week is core to our own development. And of course, I mentioned before the state government, but I want to be very specific, particularly to the Minister mentioned, Ganu Surbest, and her organisation, Global Victoria. We say thank you. To our other partners, AGL, Nine, Federation Square, Netwealth, and Sayers. And I could go on, but instead, I've got to welcome a man who cancelled everything but still managed to show up, come tonight because it was so important to him, my good friend, Russel Howcroft. Thank you, Bruce.
Okay, everyone, let's get into it. So thank you, Professor Mark, my great friend, Professor Mark, for giving me the right words, a knowledge exchange. That's ultimately what the next hour or so is going to be about. We're going to go around the world. Thanks to Global Vic. So Ganu is somewhere over there. Thank you, Ganu, for everything that you do. She informed me a couple of years ago now that, do you know that Global Victoria's got 27 offices around the world? So the reach of our state into the world is significant, 27 offices. So what we thought we'd do as part of this knowledge exchange is go to a few offices and find out, okay, so what's going on in this evening's event, what's happening in India, what's happening in the USA, what's happening in Israel, and find out how their economies are thriving, find out what some tech entrepreneurs are doing, learn from that, and then we'll have a panel discussion and hear about what's actually happening in Melbourne as well. We're going to have Q&As when we have our panel, so please write down stuff that you find interesting that's going on in the various markets. And I really hope this is a new model, it's a new idea. I really hope the notion that we lean on the commissioners that are around the world in these 27 offices find us someone really interesting that's really leading the way in a particular market in a country, and we can all learn from it, and then maybe copy them or maybe beat them. Because ultimately, what is the grid about? The grid's about making sure we've got a thriving economy right here in Melbourne. We want to win. I'm sure everyone here wants to win. We want to ensure that we've got a great future for our generation, the next generation, and that beyond. I could go on about that particular subject matter, but it's absolutely critical that we recognise the economy of the world is fundamentally changing. What do those changes look like, and what are we doing to ensure that we win? Okay, we're going to go to Israel first. It's exciting, isn't it? Right, we're going around the world. We go to Israel. Tim Dillon is the Agent General to the United Kingdom and Commissioner to Europe and Israel. I want to live in Israel at some point, Kate. I hope you don't mind. Right? Tim brings significant experience in global affairs, having previously served as Commissioner for Victoria in China, Commissioner for Victoria in Southeast Asia, and as the Executive Director in the Tokyo office. I can see Tim is there. Now, Tim, I'm going to rely on you to introduce Dr. Ilan Sassoon in Israel. So over to you. Please welcome Tim Dillon.
Thanks very much, Russell, and yes, Minister, Lord Mayor, what a pleasure to be here streaming in live from Tel Aviv for The Grid. Basically, Israel is one of those offices that was mentioned, and in 2017, the Victorian government made the decision to open it. There's a lot of reasons for that, but primarily, Israel is famous as an innovation and startup ecosystem, which has been really booming in recent years. Indeed, even during the height of the pandemic in 2021, they had a record year for attracting investment into their local startups of just under $26 billion, which was an increase of 150% year before. Another interesting fact about Israel, which will no doubt surprise many of you, but is of interest, is that with only 0.1% of the population, global population, Israel accounts for 8% of global unicorns. And one area that we're going to focus on today that Israel is seeing a huge amount of growth in is artificial intelligence. It's incredibly important to our future as it has the ability to harness massive amounts of data and use the learned intelligence to make optimal decisions and discoveries in the fraction of the time that it would take humans to do. So I'm joined here today with Israel company Data Science Group, who have recently established in Melbourne, and they're a leading multidisciplinary data consulting group specialising in providing end-to-end artificial intelligence solutions. And represented today is the CEO and co-founder, Dr. Ilan Sassoon. Dr. Ilan, thank you for making the time to be here today. He's a high-tech entrepreneur and CEO who has been a co-founder of a number of software startups in Israel. He has a PhD in knowledge representation, graph mining, and temporal trend detection in unstructured data. Quite a mouthful, that one. And he's also currently an adjunct lecturer at Tel Aviv University teaching big data analytics. So, Dr. Ilan, fantastic to have you here today. I'm going to jump straight in with a few questions for you that you can expand upon. But let's start with an easy one. What does the fourth industrial revolution mean for your organisation?
Right. First of all, thanks for having me here. So, well, I believe it's not only is AI, transforming traditional underserved industry, but it's also a driving force behind Industry 4.0. So nowadays, our main focus is provide AI-enabled applications in areas such as supply chain management, shipping companies, predictive maintenance, RPA, which stands for Robotic Process Automation, and manufacturing optimization. Let's say in the mining industry, and for example, we developed for Newcrest, one of arguably the largest gold mine in the world, an optimization system, which are really improving production efficiency in the chemical process of extracting gold from the source. So that's just one example where we had.
Fantastic. What really excites me about these sort of new sectors and technology is what the future might hold. So where do you see
AI and I suppose the impact it will have on the world in, say, 5, 10, 50 years? What can we expect from it?
So usually I like to predict the past, not the future, because it's much harder, but to be serious. So first of all, let's start with the challenge, okay? The field of AI is still young and it's has not yet reached maturity. So, and currently, technology stack is still evolving. So we face a technology environment with no standards for deploying AI system. There are misguided strategy for developing AI and limited ability to guarantee ongoing performance. And actually, it's all about fragmented technology stack. So I hope, first of all, I hope that with the next 5 years, we will see more standard and design patterns, how to develop and how to deploy AI-enabled application in a more standard manner. So, but specifically for your question, so AI near future, I believe revolves around collaborative intelligence. Will humans and AI work together to get the most from both parties' skills? Okay, this future, the way I see it anyway, will not be about a polar extreme, but finding those sweet spots of how humans and machine work together. And the way to put it is the synergy between the precision of the machines and creativity of humans. So it's not about replacing our humans necessarily, but a more specific task that humans that machines can do better than humans. So short-term AI would be more about some technologies such as self-supervised learning, which will enable models to learn facts about their internal data representation and generalize better. And also the future of deep learning, which is a major component of AI, is a multimodal models, which are significantly harder to build than, language only or vision only models. So combining, let's say, visual and textual into a signal representation is a difficult task. And going in the future, for the long term, the future will be determined by the transition for what we know as narrow AI, which is a single task AI, to AGI, which stands for Artificial General Intelligence, which emphasizes what we call general purposes ability and is characterized by deficiency in skill acquisition rather than the skill itself. So the third wave of AI is more about cognitive cognition, including symbolic representation and symbolic reasoning and causality. And the holy grail, I would say, of machine is to understand understanding, in that it should be able to say, sorry, I don't know. We are not yet there yet.
Thank you very much. You touched on that sort of regulatory environment, and this is of interest to me because, that's one area I think there's a role for government to play. Perhaps you could delve in what type of regulatory environment, what do you think would, smart cities of the future should be addressing now in that space in order for AI to grow in the right way?
So when we talk about regulation, I think that the term we should use is what we call trusted AI. And trusted AI is based on 4 pillars. To begin with, the first AI system in general should be using training data and models that are free of bias. So to avoid unfair treatment of certain group or discrimination of some population. And then also the second component is robustness, which AI system should be safe and secure with measures to enforce data privacy and security such as GDPR and so on. And then the third one is about explainability and transparency of those black box models. Some of them are really black box by design, okay? They are not algorithmically transparent to the user, to the end user. So AI system which provide a decision that, or suggestion that can be understood by the human business stakeholder or the business or the one who is making this decision. And then and the fourth component is about AI observability. The idea is that AI systems should include details of their development, deployment, and maintenance, so they can be audited throughout the whole life cycle. So let's say post-deployment monitoring is a key factor component in maintaining model performance over time due to data shift and scope. So, let me put it this way: when it comes to AI, the only constant is change, and we have to be prepared for that.
And boy, isn't the world changing rapidly, and we need to make decisions quickly on the run to optimize that. It really is quite amazing AI. You know, we're talking about breakthroughs potentially in medical solutions, finding that cure for cancer, through to, I think, you know, optimal solutions in transport. You know, will we ever see the day where we get rid of traffic jams, or we can have a significant impact on climate change by reducing the amount of emissions from our transport? And I know Victoria's definitely focused on that carbon abatement from our transport. So you mentioned, I think, in one of your examples earlier, as shipping, and I know you've done some modelling around shipping, and could you talk a little bit about that one? I think it was about route efficiency and.
Well, when it comes to shipping, we have to understand that this is a underserved market when it comes to AI, and we work with one of the largest shipping company in Israel, called Zins, that I am just listed in the New York Stock Exchange. And for them, we've done some work with container repositioning, fuel consumption, ETA to port and stuff like that, which really helped a lot using existing data that they already collected over the last few years, and they had the technology stack to support it. So I think we bring value to business stakeholder in the decision makers, which is very important. Analyzing data with machine learning and AI.
Yeah, fantastic. And, you know, Melbourne having the busiest container port, one of the busiest in the Southern Hemisphere, certainly in Australia. I'm sure we can use some of those solutions there. Look, I know we're running short on time, but I did want to slip this one last question, because we work closely with your team to set up in Melbourne, and we're very proud of that. It's a great addition to our landscape. But could you maybe tell us a little bit about what attracted you to Melbourne, what influenced the decision to set up in Melbourne for DSG?
Sure. Well, the fact that Australia, and I think specifically the Victorian government, is not only willing to promote AI, but also to invest in AI, is a strong economic driver. I believe that the Asia and Pacific markets have a great deal and potential, and will make a substantial portion of DSG expansion. So my vision is that Melbourne will serve, I believe, as a hub for the entire region. Collaborating with government entities, academias, university, and local enterprise partners. And that's the reason to do that. And the other reason that I've never been to Australia. So I want to come to Australia.
Fantastic. And we look forward to welcoming you to Melbourne. I'm sure there's plenty in the audience today after hearing you talk, Dr. Alan, who will be wanting to meet you. So you'll get a very warm welcome. Well, I think we've used up our time, Dr. Alan. Thank you very much for that. Russell, I hope you could all hear that and came through clearly. Over to you. Thank you.
Great stuff, Tim. Thanks, Tim. Thanks, Dr. Alan. We all know that Israel's known as a startup nation. Awesome. What do we want the grid to do? We want Melbourne to be known as the startup city. That's the objective. Now, next we're going to go to India. So I'm assuming that we've got Michelle Wade there. Michelle is the Commissioner for Southeast Asia, State Government, Victoria. Michelle Wade is a highly experienced international trade official and has held senior Australian diplomatic positions in, how good is this, in Italy, Malaysia and Spain. Michelle manages Victoria's government trade, education and investment activities in Southeast Asia. There she is. And Michelle, I'll ask you to introduce your guest if you wouldn't mind. Great to see you. Round of applause from Melbourne. Thanks, Michelle.
Thanks, Russ.
Let's
I was
go.
hoping for a bigger round of applause than that, but I'm sure we'll get one at the end, guys. So good evening to Melbourne. I'm coming to you tonight or this afternoon, our time in India, from Mumbai, and I've got Ayushi Gudwani joining us from Delhi. So from our perspective, I normally work in Bangalore, but I've got two staff in Mumbai as well. Bangalore is very much known as the tech capital of India. The reason I'm in Mumbai right now, and this will flow into another conversation about Ayushi, is yesterday we were here simultaneously broadcasting a seminar to VC investors, to venture capital investors. And so we were doing that with our offices in Singapore, with Tokyo, and here in the room with venture capitalists from Mumbai. The reason that we were doing that is we're trying to give a profile to Victoria, and we're trying to get the venture capitalists who might be particularly investing in tech companies to really think about Melbourne as they're working with and advising their tech companies about their overseas markets as well. So it's a great pleasure to have with me Ayushi Gudwani, the founder and CEO of Fable Street. Ayushi's got an incredible business that I know you're going to love hearing about because it's relatable, but it's also data-driven. It's a data-driven clothing company. Ayushi's an engineer by training. She's got an MBA and silver medal from IIM Kolkata. That's an incredibly prestigious institution. And she worked for McKinsey & Co. for 7 years. So not necessarily what you think your sort of normal head of a fashion company might come from. Now, she's such a great innovator in the e-commerce and retail space that last year Ayushi was named in Forbes 40 Under 40 list. Now, I want you to get your heads around this because it's an honour in any country to get into this list. But I'm sure that many of you know that with India's incredible youth population, my calculation this morning, this puts Ayushi in a list of 40 people out of about 750 million. So 750 million people. So I reckon that's a pretty impressive list to be on. And she's also recently been named the Queen of Workwear by Times of India, which is India's biggest circulation newspaper. So a little bit about e-commerce to contextualise it. I've lived and worked in India for almost 5 years. And what's been really exciting for me is what an amazing time of transformation that has been. You know, I've been watching people coming online and buying online through that period. And then COVID really further impacted that when people couldn't get out of their houses and they had to be buying more online. The Indian e-commerce market is predicted to grow at about 20% this year, and that compares to India's GDP growth of around 7%. And obviously, with growth comes incredible innovation. So I'm really looking forward to having you hear a little bit more about Ayushi. I mentioned that the venture capitalist bit at the start because one of the things that we do is we keep an eye on innovative companies in India who are going for Series B funding, the funding that normally helps them grow significantly. And that was how we first took note of Ayushi, and we invited her down in February 2020 for T20 Women's World Cup in Melbourne. We like to call it our last great night out, don't we, Ayushi? But yes, we're looking forward now to, as things recover, a few more good nights out. But we'll now start with some questions about Fable Street. And one of the USPs of Fable Street is that you offer customised sizes. And we're reading a lot in around issues about hyper-personalisation. So can you tell us a bit about how you leverage data and what that means for the Fable Street brand?
First of all, thank you for such a warm introduction, Michelle. Clearly, I'm remembering the 2020 last night out, and we have still not socialized in that manner anymore. But very excited to be here and very excited to share the journey. It's been an incredible 5 years of running the business, and also, as you rightly said, that Indian e-commerce as a space is completely transformed. What's something that we've also seen is that innovative companies have actually made a lot more headway from a futuristic point of view, and that's why the Series B, Series C's funding, etc., is going on. As we started Fable Street, I think the fact that I'm a non-fashion entrepreneur and just don't have any clue about fashion in India or globally, but coming from a very strong business and a forward-looking background, the idea was how do we bring in the futuristic aspects of building large-scale businesses and startups to the apparel as a space. And that's where the lens of data and then eventually tech comes in. And so data is actually core to the way we do Fable Street. The one obvious thing that we talked about is doing custom sizing for India and Indian women, where we actually collect data of 3 body measurements only, as opposed to about 15 different body touch points. And we use it to give a great fit. We don't claim a perfect fit, but we say great fit at a price point of, if I talk about Melbourne, it would be a price point of H&M or Zara. And that's the price point we operate with. So that's what data does for us. We can actually deliver a good fit remotely via an online business. But the second part around data, and which we seldom talk about, is that data is also crucial to deliver a great business and scale this up over longer term. So we have actually internalized every department thinking through the data and insights, and that's been the core reason for our early successes that we've seen. So be it the design, be it the range planning, be it supply chain, be it inventory buildup, all aspects have actually imbibed data analytics to help us build a very efficient business. And today the outcome for us is, from a data point of view, that we run with more than 2,000 styles at any point in time. At the same time, we hold an inventory of less than 30 days, and we are growing 30% month on month. All three things together would be impossible to achieve if we weren't very close to data analytics and building the tech to deliver that.
Great. Ayushi, can you talk, when we spoke about sizing the other day, you mentioned returns for a standard company and returns for your company, how that impacts your profitability. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, so absolutely. Overall, if we understand the Indian context, and I also believe that it's significantly a strong global context also, when it comes to online, different brands have different sizing across. So returns typically lend in, at least in India, in the range of 25 to 30% when it comes to just purely because of sizing. Our numbers are about 4.5 to 5% for overall from a business perspective, and that completely topples down the equation, and we are therefore profitable a lot earlier. That also results in great customer repeats, etc. So it works really, really well for us. And it's purely because of, again, leveraging the data and therefore triangulating and doing best fit sizes for people in India.
Yeah, I think that's quite incredible, because it's not how I imagined the company was originally set up. So sort of for the audience in Melbourne, part of buying sort of traditional Indian clothing, getting measured for a sari, is having a very customised fit done and a lot of measurements. So I can imagine why customisation and sizing was always part of your vision. But did you establish the brand with the intention to leverage the data to impact your sizing overall? Or did that notion come later when you suddenly realised the power of the data that you held?
So what's very interesting is that by design, as a founder, I'm a very hypothesis-driven person. So it was actually a conscious call to be collecting data from day one and leveraging it for improvising the sizing. So in reality, we actually do custom fits or customized sizing for less than 5% of our customers. 95% of the customers actually buy standard size. But what this collection of data does for us is actually three things. And if you're smart about it, we can leverage it. Number one is it creates great USP from a consumer point of view. They have that I'm getting custom fit, or the fact that this company knows about fit. So it's a brand identifier for a lot of people. Second thing is that we actually leverage that data to use and feedback to our standard size. So we actually run data and algorithms month on month, and every next sizing that we issue and roll out for the brands, for our brand, is actually better than the previous sizing. And third, overall, I think it's also helped us gain ownership of sizing in the entire country. And today we are also now using that to leverage it not just across our own brand, which is Fable-free, but we are also building new brands where we can just duplicate it because we are sitting on that data. So it's a long-term intellectual property. If you understand apparel as a space, and I knew when I was entering into it, it's an extremely cluttered space, very easy for anyone to come and set up. So the idea from the start back in 2016 was already very clear that we need to build a long-term defensible intellectual property, which is something that you can hold on to. It's very hard to otherwise, sustain and exist long-term. So we thought through it. So the answer is it was very well thought through. We've only improvised and improved over time, and the data helps us become smarter, but the idea was existing from day one.
Now, Ayushi, I'm a geek at heart, so I love talking about algorithms and data. So what was the tipping point where you think you had enough women's measurements for the data to become valuable in terms of setting and understanding that the standard sizes for women in India?
So the tipping point for us, I would say, is when we crossed about more than 20,000 odd measurements and data collection for us, where the accuracy of the data became so strong that we could actually transition it into identifying the root cause and future errors. Before that tipping point, also, we were very smart, I would say, in terms of while we collected data, we actually applied a lot more qualitative thinking to the data to still ensure that we can give better fits. But yes, around, I would say, 20,000 body measurements and the points is when we actually do it. At this point in time, we've basically are upwards of more than 200,000 body measurements. So 10x of the tipping point, and therefore we see now more incremental answers rather than a drastic change in the answer.
That's great. That's incredible. That's actually a lower number than I would have anticipated for that. Now, here's something that everyone from Melbourne is very much going to relate to, because we've all spent a lot of time at home over the past 2 years, and we've only been seen from the waist up, just as we are today.
No.
Workwear and COVID are not two words that naturally go together, but you managed to grow your business and your brand recognition, and you developed an innovative new product that is now a foundation product for Fable Street during COVID. And I suspect after I say this that every woman in the audience is going to Google your brand tonight to know more about this product. So can you tell us about your business success in elasticized pants?
Oh my God, I think this is a question we've been asked so many times. So let me start with saying elasticized pants are real answers for solving for comfort for women in India, at least, and I'm sure globally. We call them live-in. So if you want to go to our website, you should search for LIVIN, live-in, and the idea behind this is that you can actually live in those. And they're actually massive success over last 2 years. We thought it was a temporary phenomena, but once we launched it, it is never ending. So it's actually resulted in a change in consumer behavior altogether. And I'll tell you the hidden secret, it contributes to about 15% of the revenue, and it is huge. So 10 styles or 15 styles in totality of 2,000 styles contributing to 15% of revenue is, I'm sure you can do the math. So they are big. They are very crucial to our success. The core reason behind why this works is going back to 2-3 folds. Number one is the design sensibility and the mindset. So they are not your home wear pajamas, I mean, as you call it in India, or the jogger pants. They are actually genuinely formal looking pieces which you can wear and sit comfortably in and just step out of your home and even go to work with. So there is a special innovation in terms of the design as the fabrics that we have used. And then the second aspect is massive, understanding of the consumer behavior. And in this case, we started with qualitative understanding and then eventually translated into data-oriented understanding to grow this entire business. So we knew back in 2020 December that, the reality is that the COVID or the focus on comfort is here to stay, because we had worked from home for almost 9 months by the end of the year. So we knew that people were so used to comfortable and, as you said, waist up. So as and when you will go back to work, or whether you go back to work or not, you will never now forget comfort, or style will not get precedence over comfort. So how do we solve for comfort deeply? And elasticized pants for the answer. People have gone one size up, people have gone one size down, and it's purely not just around the waist, it's around your hip, it's around your bottom. So this works with 2 sizes up and down. So very excited about this product. You can Google live-in at Fable Street and you will see them.
And Ayushi, I greatly enjoyed, and I enjoy your social media a lot. And so you used a new word the other day, which was fitisfied. And so for everyone, that's when your pants fit properly, you feel fitisfied. So another interesting part, and this is going to be music to the ears of Lord Mayor Sally Capp, who's in the audience, I think, tonight, is that many brands start as shop fronts and then go online. But in Fable Street's experience, you're doing the opposite. So you're now starting to develop store presences to complement your online sales. So can you tell me what's the motivation to have bricks and mortar retail at this point in your online company's growth?
So, see, overall, over running the business for last 5 years, we've clearly realized that the consumer that shops online is also slightly different from the consumer that shops offline. And in case of brick and mortar, and when it comes to fashion and apparel, you cannot ignore the importance of trying to do touch and feel by your hand. And so many people actually want to, touch, feel, and buy once you see the product. So trials are very crucial. The second thing is also the world has changed, but we do believe that in case of brick and mortar, there's great discovery. People can do and try one piece, and then they can come back to you online in a repetitive behavior. So we actually believe that online to offline and offline to online combined is one of the more critical futures when it comes to retail and apparel in India. And I think that's also a global phenomenon that's going, and that's why we do believe that we want to run it this way.
That's great, Ayushi. Well, I think our time is up now, but it's been fascinating to talk to you. I hope the audience in Melbourne's enjoyed this greatly. You've heard about data-driven business and how that's influenced business success, innovation through COVID and the elasticized pan, and also that online and successful online business doesn't mean the end. In fact, it can mean the growth of bricks and mortar retail. So thanks again, Ayushi, and we hope to have you in Melbourne again soon.
Here we go. Thank you, Ayushi. Thank you very much, Michelle. Now, I don't know, the thing that really stood out for me, did Ayushi say that she's growing 30% month on month? Jesus. How good's that? Right. Okay, so we're going around the grounds. Finally, our final commissioner is Nigel Warren, Mr. Nigel Warren. Now, Nigel sent me a note a couple of days ago saying, I hope you don't mind, it's 1 a.m. is when you would be asking me to go to bed, and so I'm going to send you a tape. So he's done that. I let him off the hook. Fair enough? So we've got Nigel Warren. Nigel's Commissioner to the Americas and former Australian Consul General to the US. Nigel Warren is he's a champ. He's been all over giving us a hand here with the grid. And he said, what about if I speak to a fellow called John Hartnett? Now, John Hartnett is CEO and founder of Silicon Valley's SVG Ventures. Look it up on Google whilst you're looking up Livin, L-O-V-I-N. SVG Ventures, part of the Thrive Group. It's an innovation and investment platform working with Fortune 500 corporations, global tech startups, advanced in particular in the future of food and agriculture. This is a really great interview. After that interview, I'll be back with our panel. Please, cheese, wine, go for it. See you soon.
Well, good evening, Russell, and welcome from San Francisco Bay Area, from Silicon Valley. It's great to join you all here this evening at the Grid. My name is Nigel Warren. I'm the Victorian Commissioner to the Americas, based here in San Francisco. And I am really excited this evening to be able to have a conversation with a fantastic guest, John Hartnett, who's the founder and Chief Executive Officer of SVG Thrive. Look, John, I'm really interested in the area that you're focused on, not just because of my own personal interest, but the massive impact that it could make to the future of our state. It's such an interesting area. It's a changing area. It's one of rapid growth and I think of really highly relevance to Victoria. I'm looking at the sort of areas that you cover at SVG Thrive, and I had to stop after I looked at what's going on in the market and alternative proteins and food safety and personalised nutrition and food waste. It just went on. And I thought, I need to stop and have a bit of a chat with you and to really unpack some of these areas. So thanks so much for joining us, for joining the Grid this evening in Melbourne, for connecting with all these great Victorian companies that we have. And I really appreciate your time. I would love to just start out and find out a bit more, and I'm sure the audience would love to find a bit more out about you and SVG. Could you just tell us a bit more about, who you are and what's your focus?
Excellent. Well, thank you, Nigel. I'm delighted to be able to participate, on the Grid. And I'm based in Silicon Valley, so I'm 1 hour south of you in San Francisco. And I think, as you all know, Silicon Valley is very much kind of at the center of the world when it comes to innovation and technology. I'm not Californian, as you can probably detect. I'm originally from Europe and Ireland, but I've been in the Bay Area, Silicon Valley for the last 24 years. obviously all of that time has been focused on technology. I've been part of technology companies that invented a smartphone, company called Palm. I worked at the time in Apple and also AT&T. So kind of very much in the tech scene here, and also kind of experienced, how a small company can grow into a massive company, worldwide. SVG Ventures and Thrive, we're an innovation and investment platform focused on the agri-food supply chain. And, just to kind of maybe just give you some framing about why agri-food, and why this space. We're very much focused across the supply chain. So think about from field to fork. And it's about an $8 trillion industry worldwide. It typically represents about, 3, 4, 5% of GDP of most countries. It's very much the backbone of most countries and most provinces and states in the US and around the world. And it's also a big employer. And just looking at some of the numbers in Victoria, for example, it's $16 billion of value for Victoria today, and it employs about 81,000 people in Victoria. And half of the land in Victoria is agriculture land. So I assume this will be a very meaningful area. And our vision is really to advance the future of food and agriculture through innovation. Farmers, growers are challenged by, lack of resources, climate change, wildfires, water challenges, labor, etc. And it's just not as easy as let's do more with less, or, try to increment our way along. It's really about innovation. And innovation is now revolutionizing the world of food and agriculture. And I would say that in the last 2 years in particular, with COVID, I think COVID has accelerated the importance and the critical nature of this by almost 5 years, because again, we're all very, front and center in terms of, food being brought to our family tables. So that's our focus. And, our platform is really around finding great companies that are either disrupting or improving the food supply chain, all very technology orientated. We invest in those companies, and we help those companies grow and scale. And today we work with almost 7,000 startups from about 100 countries around the world.
Yeah, that's amazing, John. I mean, you mentioned disruption a number of times there, and I was trying to, look through kind of some of the biggest changes and some of the biggest opportunities. Are there parts of that food and parts of that ag ecosystem that are being disrupted maybe a bit more quickly or at a bit more pace? One thing I notice here, living in the US for a few times, is pace to market, change in market, getting to the market with some real sort of rapid approach is critical. Is that disruption happening in some areas more than others with more pace?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's important to recognize there's a few macro drivers that is kind of changing the world today. Obviously, there's the growth in population going from about 7.5 billion people to 10 billion people by 2050. And that's obviously putting a burden in terms of doing more. Yep. The bigger changes are really around the change in that population. Half of the world's population is either Gen Z and under 20 years of age. That generation are very much aware of the food that they eat from a health perspective. And they're also very much aware of the impact to the environment. And they care a lot about climate and they care about sustainability. So these are big drivers, not just for today, but for the future. So what is that doing in terms of disruption? What we're kind of seeing how that plays out in both technology and the consumer side. I think one of the biggest disruptions actually happening in the food industry is around next generation proteins and people being more aware of the food that they eat because they want to know that it's healthy for them. I'm not from the Gen X. I'm an older population that enjoyed, tasty food versus, the goodness it has. So I think that next generation proteins or new foods are really kind of a way of the future. And it's, this has been here in the US with the likes of Impossible Foods and Beyond Meat, but also in Australia, in Australia with Cyro and V2 Meats. This is quite a very significant company here. So that's a big change. The other big change is around the challenges around labor and automation. Farmers, it's a cost issue in terms of, labor, but it's also availability of labor. So the whole area of robotics automation, that becomes, can you do more, leveraging technology to be able to do it more efficiently, whether it's robotics automation. And that's kind of leaning into areas around farm management systems, where can you predict what the farmer needs to do rather than having the farmer doing something the same way as they always will. And then, finally, I would say, biotech continues to be a big area of disruption and change. And then the whole world of controlled environment farming or vertical farming, growing indoors and closer to customers.
Right.
When you have to truck product from a field like here in California or here in the US, berries might be grown in Peru, but they have to be trucked all the way to New York.
Right.
Controlled environment farming is, how can you have that in a vertical farm, maybe in New York City, and it cuts out a lot of that waste, etc. So these are kind of some of the disruptions that are being driven by the macro picture.
Yeah, and probably even more prevalent today with all of the supply chain challenges we've got globally. That kind of close to market, close to buy, close to consumers, going to be even more critical. John, you mentioned the 7,000 plus startups. I was amazed, getting to listen and learn about your business, the amount of corporates that you're working with. Love you to kind of unpack a little bit those corporate partners. Why you've got a lot of them. Why are they coming to work with you? What's the advantage? And how are they interacting with all those startups that you're working with?
Yeah, I mean, one of the big things that is happening in the corporate world, or the dilemma of a CEO in a corporation. The CEO in a corporation is thinking about, how do I grow my business and how do I drive profitably? He's also waking up, or she's waking up at night and thinking about who's going to disrupt my business, or waking up at nighttime in terms of, do I have the talent pool that's there? Do I have the diversity of that talent? And also disruptions in my supply chain. So these are like major corporations are all facing these kind of challenges. In addition to looking into the future in terms of sustainability, how do I ensure that my company is going to reduce, the carbon footprint of that company? So these are things that are, I would say, keeping CEOs and leaders of these corporations up at nighttime. And what we've seen time and time again, I went through it in the smartphone industry. A young startup comes up and invents a smartphone, yet the big companies, the Motorola's, the Nokia's, etc., all multi-billion-dollar companies didn't see that coming. Or if you look at the automobile industry today, Tesla didn't exist 20 years ago. Now Tesla is $1 trillion company worth more than all the German and Japanese automakers. So a lot of the automotive industry are flocking to Silicon Valley to kind of see and find some of these solutions. But the tough thing for corporations is trying to find the needle in the haystack. It's like, there's 40,000 startups here in Silicon Valley, just to kind of give you kind of a frame. So how do you know which one is the smart one? So that's one of the things that we do, is kind of join the dots in terms of understanding the requirement of the corporation, and at the same time really kind of dialing in and understanding all the various different startups and how good or great they're going to be.
Right. Yeah, that's, the scale's incredible, isn't it? 40,000 just in the San Francisco Bay Area, Silicon Valley, which is just an important part, but obviously not the entirety of the US market. Look, I spend with my team, and we've got a phenomenal team across North and South America, the Americas. We spend time thinking about, okay, what can we focus on that's going to make the biggest difference for the future of the state in the next 3, 5, 10 years? Where are we going to get new industry growth, new job creation? You mentioned a lot of areas there of interest: robotics, biology, vertical farming. How big could some of these opportunities be in the next decade? If I'm looking forward to 2032, am I going to be vertical farming myself? I mean, how big is this opportunity potentially going to be for the industry and for consumers and for business?
Yeah, I mean, I'm obviously very excited about this and biased, but I think it's the biggest opportunity of the century.
Wow. Okay.
And I've lived in Silicon Valley for 20 plus years. I've seen Google come from nowhere. I've seen Facebook come around. I saw the smartphone. But in the end of the day, the food supply chain is what brings food to our family table. It drives the health of the planet, it drives the health of human beings, and we all have a passion around trying to solve world hunger or some of the challenges that are there. So this is at the highest, level in terms of every citizen and every person in every country. So the scale and size of this is absolutely massive. And as I explained earlier, like with Victoria, Victoria is a leader in Australia and in the world in terms of, dairy, fresh food, in terms of specialty crops and grain. So I think it could be very, very meaningful, in a significant way here. If you think about disruption, 20 years ago, we used to buy books in the store, and now we buy them through Amazon, and we buy a lot more through there. Well, think about the future of where you're growing your products, is that closer to the consumer? So vertical farming, I think, could definitely be one, and it could be very interesting from an Australia perspective. I think robotics automation, there isn't that much robotics automation going on in the fields, even though you could, if you're listening to people here in Silicon Valley, you think it's happening all over, but it's not really. But I think over the next 5 to 10 years, you're just going to see an explosion of leveraging not just the robotics automation and the autonomy, but leveraging AI and computer vision to detect and predict, key aspects. In my view, if farmers and growers and the food industry in Victoria, if there's a $16 billion value and, Victoria becomes the lead, this could be moved from 20 billion to 30 billion, but not just do more from the food industry, but also create a whole byproduct of new technology companies that are based there solving the problems that are there. So again, it's a major area. The food supply chain is $8 trillion just on its own. So it's again a very exciting, and obviously with a lot of governments around the world, there's a great focus in terms of that supply chain. COVID has disrupted us all. It's kind of scared us a little bit in terms of the how the supply chain can make a difference to what we're doing, and also there's a heightened awareness around climate and sustainability. And I think that is also going to be a key driver going forward. So it's a really exciting area because it's real, for all of us.
And unbelievably integrated, right? So one course has a direct effect. So I think that's such a good point you make. I'll finish up on just one question. We were both recently in Melbourne. You spent some time with your team. I was incredibly impressed with the focus of your team. What did you see in Melbourne that you thought, okay, look, this is exciting. This is a real opportunity for us. Could you share with us a couple of thoughts about your recent trip to Melbourne and what you came away with from that trip?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. We had a great visit. We had about 14, 15 different meetings over the course of 3 days. We had a great tour and visit out to La Trobe and saw the AgriBio investment and operation going on there. We did an excellent meeting with probably about 20 key people with Minister Pulford these people are involved in across the agriculture side, entrepreneurs, people from the industry, etc. We also met with, industry players like the likes of Costa, who are an important, player in Victoria. And we met with some really kind of exciting startups. Few takeaways for us was, number one, we were very impressed with the quality of talent. It's the one thing that, it definitely walked away and saying, wow, some really, really smart people, young, enthusiastic and passionate people in there. And I think you were involved in some of the meetings where we met some of the entrepreneurs there. I think some of the technology that's actually happening on the ground there is very, very, very exciting for the future. I think the investment in the AgriBio and the future food focus there, I think could be a big opportunity for the future. I think the investment and the support from government is very evident. The investment in AgriBio, the breakthrough fund, that level of commitment to drive innovation. This was very, very impressive, from our perspective. And probably kind of the two things that maybe, two things that are your opportunities or challenges, whatever way you want to try and look at it, is that I think the key for us when we looked at this is at the start of creating a company. So the commercialization of that research and making it a company, coming from a scientist to an entrepreneur, there's an opportunity to unleash that, more companies, more startups, in Melbourne and across Victoria. And then probably at the other scale, I think we saw really, really great companies to grow and scale and get the support of Launch, Vic, etc. It's fantastic infrastructure there, but it's when you kind of go from startup to now you have to scale to be a global company.
Right.
How do you go from a 50 million to a $1 billion company? And I think there's an opportunity to scale at that level. So the two areas I think that there's opportunity is how do we unlock the commercialization of the research, and how do we scale Victorian and Melbourne-based companies to be global companies?
Yeah. It's such a good point you make. We've got so much to offer in our state, but we've got to be globally leading. We've got to be globally leading. We've got to be globally relevant, and the scale is just such a critical part of that. So, look, John, thanks. I mean, I'm really excited. My team's excited here in San Francisco and also Melbourne to support you as you look at the opportunities in Victoria, and more broadly, right across the country, but from a base in Victoria. So I wanted to say, look, thanks. I'm learning more and more in this area, even though I've lived and worked in this area before. I am kind of equally as passionate as you are about the future, particularly in some of these areas that you can see them kind of forming right in front of you. And they're really relevant to what we're doing in Melbourne, what we're doing more broadly across the state. So I'll probably leave it there. Russell?
Oh, good on you. Thanks. Thanks, Nigel. Thanks, Nigel and John. We don't actually have to clap them. Very nice of you, of the guys. I appreciate it very much. Okay, so we have a grouse panel. Now, everyone, cheese and wine, although I hear the wine's out. Is that right? Sorry about that. Now, in the brown bag, there is gin and tonic. So get your hands on the brown bag, and look, by the looks of it, you'll be able to take a couple home, not just one. So thanks to everyone in that brown bag. People have given us that stuff. We haven't paid for it. It's been volunteered by all those great brands. So we really sincerely appreciate everyone's engagement and involvement. Right, let's get on with the panel. What we might do is we're going to welcome people at the end by way of applause. So I'm just going to invite them to rapid fire here, Kate, if that's okay. So first up, we've got Dr. Kate Kornick. Kate's got an amazing job. She's the CEO of LaunchVic. It's Victoria's lead startup agency since 2016. That is since she's been the CEO. And Kate recently received the Global Policy Champion Award at the Global Entrepreneurship Congress for her exceptional leadership. This is a global award. Her exceptional leadership in developing a broad set of policies to dramatically increase early stage investment and help startups grow in Victoria. There is no one in this state that knows more than Kate does about what's going on in the startup economy. What's true, right? So we're really looking forward to hearing from you. Kate, next. Matt Heiner. Matt. Okay, so Matt's the joint MD. So if you wouldn't mind sitting there. Yeah. The joint MD at the ASX-listed financial services and technology company NetWealth. Matt's got 20 years' experience in the management of people's wealth. He knows where people are pointing the money, and I'm looking forward to finding out where that is. Right, next up, Christine. Christine Christian is the President of the State Library. Thanks for coming along, Christine. Christine is Chair also of the Hum Group Limited, Actis Investments Limited, Tanara Credit Partners and Immediate, and holds non-executive director roles with Max Cap Group, Lonsec Financial Group. She also serves on the boards of La Trobe Uni and Teach Australia. Christine is past president and chief executive women and former board member of ME Bank. Cracking ad campaign, I love it. Curwood Capital and Victorian Managed Insurance Authority. Good on you, Christine. Thanks for coming along. And finally, we've got Paul Docherty. Now, I hope you don't mind me calling you Docs, Paul. So, Docs is the founder and executive chair of the BRC Group. You're there, mate. For some reason, I like going this way. Okay, Docs is the executive chair of the BRC Group, While get your phones out, check out BRC Group. It's one of Australia's leading incubator and accelerator funds. BRC invests in and controls businesses across medtech. In fact, as the Minister talked about earlier, you might tell us what all that's about. Property tech, health and nutrition, and household and consumer products. Please welcome our panel. Now, okay, so I'm assuming I'm now on this thing. So is that working? Thanks everyone for coming along. Okay, so clearly everyone, there's some exciting things going on around the world. Elastic pants. Yep.
Right up.
Yeah, elastic pants. AI, yeah, we know about AI, but I'm going to come to AI, if I may, in a little while. Vertical farming. Obviously, the world is changing and changing rapidly. Fourth industrial revolution is what we're calling it. Where technology is actually accelerating change for, one would hope, greater productivity, because that is the thing that we really have to work on. I tell you what, people are talking about wage increase, but greater productivity wouldn't be a bad thing. Now, the issue is that when I read Harvard Business Review, this is 18 months ago now, they had some data that said that actually the Australian economy is now less sophisticated than it was 50 years ago. So if we rank our economy in terms of sophistication, 50 years ago we were like 50th in the world, now we're like 75th in the world. You then look at the ASX, now our top 10 stocks. Now, Matt, you know this better than me, but they're about the same as they've been for 20 years, which is nothing like you say the US, for example, where it's pretty much changed in the last 20 years.
But maybe one stock, Russ.
Bar one stock in the US?
No, in Australia.
Yeah.
Block.
Nice. And Kate Kornick, in fact, you told me not that long ago that in the UK there is a unicorn, i.e. $1 billion business, listing at a rate of, does anyone want to guess what the rate is of a unicorn listing in the UK? One a week. We've got one per week listing in the UK of unicorns. So I'm going, okay, are we falling behind? Now, for me, making sure we don't fall behind is a broad-based understanding of what's going on in the world's economy. So let's define that as a broad-based understanding of the fourth industrial revolution. So Kate, I'm going to go to you. There's lots of definitions, right? I know. But just hit it for us. Give us your definition.
Oh gosh, I don't know that I can hit the definition like that, but I will say it's change ultimately. And I think it's about, there's a lot of view that the fourth industrial revolution is AI, it's blockchain, it's all these really cool technologies, and it is absolutely that, but it's lifting productivity, and it's recognising that we need to transition a whole portion of our economy to be more entrepreneurial, and what's entrepreneurial for one person might be completely different as what's entrepreneurial for another, but in lifting the economy and moving people to a different environment and a different way of working, we're going to achieve productivity.
Right.
And I'm reminded of, many moons ago in a different industrial revolution, there was a cohort of people who were shit pickers. They literally went around picking up horse shit. And they protested in London when the automobile came in because they were losing their jobs. And who wants a job of picking up horse manure all day, every day? But the world moves, and in moving the world forward, we're going to get better jobs, we're going to create higher value jobs, and we're going to become a better society for it. So I think it's ultimately about transitioning our economy into an environment that is better for all of us. And that means better technology, it means addressing some key challenges, whether that's climate change or just lifting productivity within a business that isn't being as productive as it could be.
Yeah. So, Docs, any thoughts on, because I feel like this sort of the fourth industrial revolution, it's too amorphous. So, what is it?
Yeah. So, well, I mean, why don't we give a practical example of it? I mean, in our industry, so 3D Meditech, the Minister mentioned before, we are the largest personalised medical device facility in the Southern Hemisphere. We've got AI, robotics, a lot of 3D printers, and a whole lot of machine learning. And that's going on in Port Melbourne today. So if you think about, where are we? Where is the Victorian economy? How are we shaping up, and how are entrepreneurs shaping up? It's a pretty good example of, just down in Port Melbourne, you've got a world leader in terms of personalised medical devices. Then if we look at the market in that personalised medical device market, we can see all of the things that you're saying about the addition of technology to what are very traditional industries. And I think that's as important as anything else that we talk about are those sorts of things in food, in agriculture, obviously, in technology. So yeah, we've started that process and it exists here today. We're evidence of it.
Right, I'm going to define it for you then. Right, so
I was never going to define it myself.
Well, if you go, so first industrial revolution is a result of coal. So you had a new energy source, and the new energy source that created machines, that created greater efficiency and created greater productivity. So what's happening right now that's improving greater productivity, that is going to improve our productivity? Obviously, the Internet of Everything is going to improve productivity. Yeah? So, and clearly the fact that communication, speed of communication, travel is different now, so we don't have to travel. That's going to improve productivity. The sharing economy is going to improve productivity. So there's some big waves there, some significant waves there, which I think we all need to recognise and go, okay, so if they're the big waves that are occurring, what am I going to invest in order to ensure that I succeed? Now, I think that we're sort of naturally going there in a way, but I do think there's some sort of big picture stuff that's important. Now, but Kate, before we sort of go on into the future, I actually thought, given your role here, this unbelievable institution here at the State Library, Christine. Christine.
Yeah, it's you. It's you. I don't know who
Christine, it's you.
Someone out there.
Christine, I want to ask you, given your role as the chair here at the State Library, just some insights into our city's past and where that might be relevant for us in the future.
Okay, so look, despite the fact that I have a day job in private equity and an investor and indeed was the initiator of Start Space, which is a centre for entrepreneurship here at the State Library. So we absolutely believe in everything that that Melbourne and Victoria can offer in terms of being a leader in the economy. One thing that we should never lose sight of, I believe, is what has made Melbourne just such an incredible city. And that is our cultural institutions. I mean, Melbourne was, most people I think would know this, but Melbourne was at one point the wealthiest city in the world. On the back of our gold rush, and it's what enabled the city to erect buildings such as the State Library Victoria, the fourth busiest library in the world, the exhibition buildings, and so we have got a really rich heritage, and we are a city of entrepreneurs. And so I actually believe that we really do need to start talking about our cultural institutions as well when we start talking about our history, but also what we have in the future. And there is an absolute nexus between our economy, the startup world, just the economy more generally, and our cultural institutions, because it's what they enrich our lives. Mm-hmm. And so to have a city that is just purely focused on sort of the economy and tech would be missing out on a really major part of just enriching us as sort of evolved and more developed and enriched individuals. So I think there's a real something about Melbourne that is really special and unique. And I think it's got a great platform to, I think we can do a Unicorn a Week too. I really believe that.
Great. Well, which of course takes us to 1880, Christine. So in terms of Unicorn a Week, it's pretty fascinating, isn't it? So the exhibition buildings that was built, and we had a global expo in 1880, and 1.3 million people went through the joint in 1880, and a lot of startups were created right back then.
Absolutely. I mean, Melbourne was a thriving place, and for anyone who wants to get sort of deeper into that, they can come to the library and just look at the archives. But we built the exhibition buildings. We had a world-renowned expo here in Melbourne.
and we were like killing it. Globally, this was the city to be at. And in fact, it's probably where the rivalry started between Melbourne and Sydney, because I think Sydney competed to have the expo in Sydney, but it ended up doing a really pretty pathetic job, really. And then Melbourne came along and really surpassed everyone's expectations. So it was the place to be.
Okay, so we're going to do a unicorn a week.
And we're going to do a unicorn a week.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about a dark time, if that's okay, just to maybe set a bit of context. So in 1991, I was living in London, and my father rang me he was in Melbourne, and he rang me and said, "Don't come back, Russ, there's nothing for you to do here." Such was the state of our economy. So Matt, I want you to give some advice to today's entrepreneurial 25-year-old and whether they should come back, if they were like me in London at the time.
It's a good question, and I was thinking about forcing it at the table. In many ways, I'm actually totally unqualified to answer that. And the reason that I say that is that I've had two jobs. One was working in the kitchen at Nando's for 2 years, and the second one was working at Welfare. I still am 22 years later. So I was actually 19 when I started there, and was very fortunate that I joined a family startup, and it literally was a startup. We had no products, no clients, no staff. I was the 5th employee. And we really had to grow the business from there. We had basically major competition. We had the big 4 banks, AMP, Macquarie, IFF, and a couple of other big names that you'll probably be aware of. So we had to work really hard. And when I think about that time, and when it was 19, 20, 25, it was an incredibly challenging period, but it was an incredibly exciting period as well. Anyone that's in the rooms either started a startup or working in a startup. It's scrappy, you have to do everything. We were designing websites on Excel spreadsheets. I was designing our own banner ads for non-MSN. And I think what would my advice be is, thinking again back to then, I had a lot of freedom, but it was within boundaries, and I had fantastic adult supervision, if you like. So finding a really good mentor, or finding an environment or a business which actually gives you that freedom to try things, to fail, to learn really quickly, I think is really important. And what we're starting to see in Melbourne now is this, the ecosystem is getting really good. It gives me great joy now, and Kate, you see this every day, where people come to me with a startup idea and say, "Oh, do you know anyone that might want to invest?" And I'm actually able to introduce them to local VC funds. Now, 5 or 10 years ago, that just wouldn't have happened. And now it's not just 1 or 2 VC funds. It's like, okay, what are you trying to do? What industry? Okay, there's actually a couple of VC funds you should talk to that specialise in women doing scaling operations. It might be in green tech, elastic pants. I haven't seen that one yet. I'm sure there is someone out there. And I think that's really exciting, but it is about productivity. Mm-hmm. We've talked about it a few times for us. Melbourne lost its mojo for a long time there. The Grid's about trying to help Melbourne find its mojo again. But when you look at some of the really good success stories, and if you think about what we just heard from Israel, innovation really starts with adversity. And nowhere in the world has been through a worse 2 years than Melbourne. So we're starting to see some incredible stories, and people have pivoted, they've come up with great ideas, they've started new businesses. And if there is one silver lining from what we've been through over the last couple of years, I think is just that reset and that ability to think creatively and do new things.
Awesome, Matt. So there is a VC ecosystem that's starting to emerge. So we'll come to that soon, Kate. So, Docs, when we look at the US, it always feels like they do a much better job at connecting tertiary institutions, so they're big unis, government and money. So I think everyone would agree that's the sense that you always get, that the Yanks are very good at just getting those 3 together. Is that because I romanticise America and how they go about tech and entrepreneurship and new ideas and money, or is that a truth?
I've got to be a bit careful because Minister Pakula called me out before, and we've got a really close connection with the government and certainly the University of Melbourne. But I would definitely say the US have been ahead of that. I was privileged enough to be at Harvard in 2015, and we saw at that time, even in their incubator space, the connection of the entrepreneur, the financier and the university in a really in a collective environment that was collaborative. The day I was there, the chairman of Diageo was listening to all of the Brazilian entrepreneurs talk about what they were doing, and was working out whether he'd fund those. So I think we've come a long way, I think, as you've heard on the panel, but I think we've got a bit to go, particularly to drag our universities through that process as well. I mean, we've got a great relationship, but COVID accelerated what we've done with the university. That would never have happened if we didn't have the pandemic.
Right. So, Kate, your thoughts on that? So the tertiary institutions, government and money, so making that triangle work. How are we faring?
It's a really fraught environment at the moment, and I think my background is working in and around the university sector. I fundamentally believe we should invest more in fundamental research in Australia, because if we're not looking over the horizon 10, 20, 30, 50 years, we would never have invented Wi-Fi in this country, and we would never have survived COVID, quite frankly, if we didn't have Wi-Fi. And so, we've got to be investing way over the horizon, pre-commercial, and I think our universities have been forced to engage with industry because that's what we need to do to commercialise, and we forget that actually what it takes to commercialise is to invest in people who can think extremely big, extremely deep, and come up with innovations that may not affect us today, but will in fact affect us in the next 5 decades. And so fundamental research is fundamental, and we should support more. If we want to be a truly innovative nation, we should be pouring money into fundamental research. Secondly, I think we definitely need to be able to translate that research out of the universities, and that's something that we have had challenges with. I think it's really easy to look to the US, and you look at the Harvards and the MITs and Stanfords. They're the iceberg, they're the very tip of the iceberg. There are hundreds of universities that also struggle with industry commercialization in the US as well, but they're not in California, and they're not in northeast of the country. So we do have a problem. It's probably exacerbated in Australia, but and it's something that we really need to address to get great research out of our universities. But it's non-trivial. Ultimately, I think the key to it is something that's grown up in the Silicon Valley ecosystem and the Boston ecosystem. There's a caliber of people who are not researchers, and they're not the founders of startups. They're serial CEOs. And they go into the universities, they can talk the language of the academics, and they can extract the technology, they can scale it to a point that is getting a Series A, and when they, a $2 million to $10 million investment, and a professional CEO will come in and help that company scale. And we don't have that class of people here in Australia. We want our researchers to be founders. I can say I started my life as a researcher, and I was a really crap researcher. I'm a really good CEO, at least I like to think I am most of the time. But there's a difference between a researcher who's trained to be a mile deep and an inch wide versus a CEO who, if you spend 20% of your time fixing one issue one day because you've got 100 other things to do, that's good enough, whereas the research environment, 100% is perfect. So you're trying to train two different people to be two different things, and we can't expect our researchers to be great CEOs and founders of companies. There are certainly people who do that. I saw Kyle Turner in the audience. He's someone who is a phenomenal entrepreneur. If you haven't checked out Pearly, please do it. Phenomenal entrepreneur, and has also got an academic background, and there are people that can translate and make that jump. So it's not a never.
What an opportunity, though, for that sort of CEO that can jump into tertiary institutions. I mean, wow.
Absolutely.
Everyone. So, Christine, I'm just, thinking about institutions. So what, as you said, Melbourne's got some amazing institutions. What can they do to use this horrible consulting term, lean into helping with the new economy?
Well, I think it's a two-way street. I think that we have got, we're a city that has got an incredible cultural landscape. We've got, artists, we've got the music scene, we've got events, we've got amazing creative people, and I do believe that what we need to do is work more effectively together. I think there's a real opportunity for industry to work far more closely with the cultural institutions and creative people, and operationalise and monetise and support each other, and because the cultural scene as is a great economic multiplier to any city, but you've got to actually be able to harness it and support it and lean into it. So I think we can work a lot more closely together.
I couldn't agree more. We probably need an event that helps make that happen. Docs, you unashamedly say you had a good pandemic.
We had a pretty good pandemic.
So tell us what you mean by that. So what did you learn as a result of the pandemic that you're going to use for the next couple of decades?
Well, I think to Christine's point, I think we learnt sort of shifting from the I to the we, and that was sort of the fundamental bit for us, right? So we started to talk about collaboration in a different fashion. I think everyone did, and I think the pandemic forced that on us. We ended up through our relationship with the university and the government being the sort of triage point for a number of the issues that were going on in the health sector, including fixing things like ventilators and hazmat suits and PPE, but more importantly for us ended up being Australia's only PCR gold standard testing kit. And I didn't know what a swab looked like, frankly, 2 years ago. And what we discovered was an industry that hadn't done a lot for 30 years, and now we've become the innovators globally in that industry. And I think that goes back to for us the shift from the insular view to the external partnership view, and that with that transformation, I think, is what Melbourne really needs to hang on to. Because from my perspective, we had 70% of the people that were on calls across the country were from Melbourne. They were from Melbourne companies. It was extraordinary to see the participation of Melburnians in the response. And I think we've got to bottle that. That is the bit for me that gives us the advantage. And as Christine said again, those partnerships, they're the key.
Right. So the notion of collaborating, the notion that we're all in this together in order to make for a better economy and better business. It's funny, that strikes me as being a huge task, right? That strikes me as a cultural task. Matt, I don't know whether you've got any perspective on that.
Yeah, collaboration is not something that's sort of naturally been a Melbourne thing, I don't think, historically. And picking up on one of your earlier points about the universities needing to get out more into the corporate world and doing research and partnering, as a corporate, and maybe we're guilty of it, I don't think I've had a single conversation with the Melbourne University about what they can do with us. There's a great institute in Adelaide, actually, the Institute of Machine Learning, which I think is now considered the 6th best institute in the world, which is pretty amazing. And they're constantly knocking on our door saying, what problems have you got? What can we do for you? How can we work with you? Yeah. And we haven't managed to find something in that space yet, and it's quite difficult to actually commercialise or work out what the engagement model looks like. But yeah, I think absolutely. The university's got a lot of bright young sparks, and we're desperate for staff, we're desperate for grads. So how do we actually all work together to solve the problems?
Christine, any thoughts on our overriding culture of business here in Melbourne?
Culture of business?
Yes.
What do you sort of mean by that?
So is our business culture one of collaboration, trust, progress, or is it something else?
I think it would like to be one of collaboration, trust and progress. I just don't feel like we have set up the infrastructure and processes sufficiently to be able to do that. I'll give you an example. When I was the CEO of an organisation, we were looking to create a credit decision engine. It was quite well ahead of its time. And the first thought we had was to go to the university and enlist some undergrads who were really terrific at machine learning and analytics. And there just wasn't actually, what struck me was that there actually wasn't a process by which we would be able to take those students and work within the organisation, even on a sort of an experimental basis or on a sabbatical basis. So I think there just needs to be a recognition that there is a really good sort of two-way street here. It helps the undergrads develop their skills and work in business, but it also helps the universities be able to participate in some of these new ventures. So I think it's about just setting our minds to it. I think it's about initiating it. Got Someone's got to do it.
Yeah, great. So Kate, as I said in the intro, there's no one who knows more than you about what's going on in the startup economy here in Melbourne. I know you're optimistic, so that's good news. So tell us why.
Well, our sector had a pretty good pandemic on the whole. We've seen 11% jobs growth in the last 2 years. The number of startups has continued to grow. There are now 2,600 startups in the state. There were about 1,800 at the start of the pandemic. Our employment is now 66,000 Victorians are employed by Victorian startups. We're seeing great ideas come through the system every single day. There is so much hunger out there for entrepreneurship and people that are really tackling really bold ideas. And it doesn't mean you're trying to put rockets on Mars. Some of the bold ideas are actually tackling really important challenges around productivity that are actually, you're like, why did I not think of that? Really simple ideas, and sometimes the simple ideas are the best ones. The one thing that I would say is we need to encourage more people to come forward, and I think to the previous question about culture, I think we're actually quite risk averse. I think our corporate culture is quite risk averse, and we're the Aussie larrikins that go around the world and bungee jump and do all this cool stuff when we're travelling with tourism. But actually, when it comes to jumping into a risky environment in a business sense, we're quite conservative. At LaunchVic, we really want to encourage people to step forward, to follow their ideas and their passions. There are so many people that I meet day in, day out that go, oh my God, I really wish I could do this. I've got this great idea. It's like, do it now. Yeah. If you know someone who's got an idea, do it. You have to jump in and take a risk. If you don't take a risk, you're not going to get anywhere. We'll just be sitting back in a risk-averse culture. So dive in, go to LaunchVic. There's a program out there to help you on your journey. We've got all sorts of things for all sorts of different sectors, all sorts of different ideas to help people on that journey. But just take that jump. And I can't call that out enough. If you know someone, make them, push them out the door. It can be really risky. It is really scary, but the reward is phenomenal.
I love it. Now, Docs, we chatted a couple of days ago about, I just love the fact that you used the word renaissance, that you see that you see the opportunity for the Melbourne economy to go through a renaissance. Now, were you just using flowery language? Or
how late was it, Russ? You had COVID, it was early. Yeah. You get these moments in time, and I think we can either take the moment in time, or we can whinge about what we've had in the past. And the way that I view COVID is through that positive lens of saying we learned some unbelievable lessons. If we don't apply those lessons, then more for us. Like we have this opportunity to do that. And so then there's the take up. So what does that mean? Again, that's flowery language. What does that mean? You know what we're not good at, in my view, and it'd be slightly controversial here, is storytelling. We have to get people on our narrative and on the journey. Yeah. We had a welcome to country that talked about boundary. I mean, what a beautiful way to explain going out and letting go of those things that you're talking about from a startup perspective. When the Minister talks about the things that are occurring, when we talk about our cultural institutions, when we talk about the support that we get from our tech entrepreneurs, we just don't tell those stories.
Exactly.
And so I don't know why we sit on them, to be honest. We've got some of the greatest stories in this country, certainly in the world, around entrepreneurship and that culture. And I just think that's where it needs to start. And that's the way you shift the culture and people come in behind you. But if there's not that leadership, and frankly, it's everyone in this room. I mean, Kyle Turner, who I know very well, sent me a text in here saying, hey, here's 2 problems to solve, right?
Yeah.
It's and I tell you, if we took this room tonight and we got a few whiteboards and we say, hey, let's solve a couple of problems, I guarantee you we'd do that. But we don't talk about it. We don't talk enough.
Yeah.
There's not enough format to do this. Welcome the grid.
Yeah, thank you.
That wasn't a plug, by the way.
I'm with you.
It's a good segue to it.
Matt,
yes.
You and I have had a chat a few times. You've been talking about the Great Reshuffle.
Yes.
I've forgotten what that is.
I think it's just a chance to have a whinge, actually.
Right.
No, the Great Reshuffle, so we would have all read about the Great Resignation. I think it's been the headline for pretty much every news article for the last 6 months. And when you start to think about that within your own business, I think the experience is quite different in Australia. And when I started to do a little bit of deeper digging, what I actually found out was that in America, the Great Resignation was actually people opting out of work. where they had a job and just decided they didn't want to work anymore for a period of time, forever, who knows, they just were dropping out of the workforce. In Australia, we are very different in that I think people are just bored of their job, and we're seeing a lot of people moving between companies. So we've been fortunate, we've actually had a few boomerangs where people have left, we've had about 4 or 5, and realised that the grass isn't always green on the other side. It was a Bitcoin or crypto startup paying more money, whatever it was, but thankfully they've come back. But there is a massive war for talent at the moment, as everyone would know, particularly in the tech industry. Salaries are sky high. So I think companies, and particularly in Melbourne, we really need to find new and interesting ways to not only retain talent, but also to attract talent, and also to restructure workforces. So some of the things that we're thinking about at the moment, particularly in that mid-tier sort of dev space, is that's where we're seeing the biggest inflation. Do we need to actually get much better grad programs going and couple them with senior developers, for example, and reshape the way that we're actually developing things and thinking about the workforce in the future? So again, I think we've got a very different economy. The world's changed as a result of COVID. And what's worse is we're not only competing against the unicorns down the street or the startups down the street, we've now got people accepting jobs globally where they can continue to work in their bedrooms, in their Ugg boots or elasticized pants, whilst working for Google or Atlassian, etc. So there's a lot of work to be done, but at the same time, I still think Melbourne's a pretty cool place. We've got great beaches and hopefully good snow this year.
So, Kate, maybe an unfair policy question, but I'm hereby appointing you Chief Growth Officer of Melbourne. So, what would you do?
What I would do is invest more in pre-accelerator programs that are going to help people take the plunge and take them on the journey to get the product solution fit, from which they can then go get product market fit. I'd put in more accelerators that are again going to help companies scale. I'd put in more funds like the Alice Anderson Fund. If you haven't looked at Alice Anderson, it's a great fund investing in women, but it's a sidecar fund. We are not trying to come in as government and push money into the sector. What we're trying to do is catalyse the private sector, and I think that's what we want to see more of, is more catalytic capital coming from the private sector with people who are investing in companies that they really genuinely care about. They're prepared to roll up their sleeves and help them on the journey. And then I would sit back and watch what we're already doing in the Series A, Series B venture market with the Breakthrough Victoria Fund, the Victorian Startup Capital Fund, the Victorian Growth Fund, the Victorian Business Fund, and another fund that's come to market in the budget, with foreign direct investment through Invest Victoria. All of those are going to make a massive difference at that middle part of the funnel. It's the front end. We've just got to get more bums on seats. If we want to be like Silicon Valley, we heard 40,000 startups, 50,000 startups. We just need more entrepreneurs in the system. At the moment in Victoria, there are about half the number of entrepreneurs in Victoria as there are in New South Wales. There is nothing about the state that makes you less entrepreneurial. There's something going on that's stopping people taking the plunge. So we really just need more people to be bold enough to get up and get off whatever system they're on, and it's hard. You've got mortgages, you've got children, you've got whatever it is that's stopping you, but you do need to take the plunge. You need and just follow your passion. And if you're like me and your startup isn't wildly successful, you learn so much along the way, and you will get to other places. And it's the journey, not the destination.
Okay, Kate. So you just told us that there's half the entrepreneurs in Melbourne as there is in Sydney.
I can help bridge that. And just bring them to the start space here at the State Library. It's the only free pre-accelerator space in the state. And if there's any young people who really want to sort of test their ideas.
So Christine, do you advertise that?
No, it's free. It's a free service.
Do people know about it?
It's a bit like the philosophy of libraries, and that is that they're egalitarian and they're the people's universities. But I'm advertising it now.
Fantastic. Right, Doc, Chief Growth Officer.
Yeah.
Well, actually, Joint Chief Growth Officer. Any thoughts?
I'd get really good about telling our story, Melbourne story, and I'd find a platform to do that.
Okay.
I don't feel like there's one platform to do that. I know launch figures, and I know there are a number, but where do I go?
Like a media platform as much generally?
Yeah. Yep, absolutely. I'd really encourage our leaders to lead. And as trite as that sounds, it's fundamental to us inspiring people to go to the next stage. To your point, like how do they go? They need inspiration. That's the jumping over the cliff, right? That's the bit. And If we don't do that, then we're going to get the same result. The third thing I'd do, Russ.
Yes.
I would get, and they talked about it a little bit, our Irish friend in the US. I'd get a group of 12 to 20-year-olds, and I'd start talking to them about what does their future look like? What does their future city, their future state look like? Because it's so wonderful to listen to them talk about the metaverse, the way that they interact, the social interactions, and we as parents complain about that, but my kids know more people overseas because of the technology that they're provided than probably I do at my age. Yeah. And so they're getting ideas and input and a whole range of different things that we can never have. Right. And so that for me feels like the spark, those two things.
Got it?
Yep.
Kate, you want to say something?
Yeah,
if anyone's got any questions, well, I'm going to come to you guys in a sec.
I entirely agree with what Doc's saying. It's something LaunchVic is working on, but you can't be what you can't see. And there are 20 unicorns in Victoria right now. I wonder how many of you can actually name the companies, let alone name the brilliant people behind those companies.
Yeah, that's right.
And we can all name sports stars, but we can't name people that are fundamentally transitioning our economy and doing wonderful things for the community and solving really big challenges. And we do need to put our great entrepreneurs up on a pedestal so they do become household names.
Love it. So Christine, I've got a leading question for you. So would you like to see a festival for innovation, idea, technology, startups as part of the Melbourne cultural calendar? Slotting in amongst the Comedy Festival, Rising and the Fashion Festival.
You betcha, absolutely. I mean, we're ready for it.
I agree with you, Christine. So Matt, would you like to say that?
I'm a South by Southwest tragic, so I'd love to have that at home and not have to get on a plane.
Yeah. In fact, I mean, South by Southwest is fascinating. There's less than 1 million people that live in Austin, Texas, and it brings 280 million into the economy just over that fortnight. Another one, maybe everyone get onto your mobile phone and check out Collision. So Collision's happening in Toronto. And in effect, it's another South by Southwest. So Toronto has decided that they need to, create a moment in time where all these ideas and all the storytelling can come together, so you can focus on it and you can get to know who those 20 companies are and who those entrepreneurs are, and the opportunity that a CEO might have to go into a tertiary institution in order to find that idea. Go to Matt, find some money. Go to Docs, get a hand. You can sort that out as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean,
and I think we shouldn't also forget that there are more than one type of entrepreneur. They're not just tech entrepreneurs. We've got social entrepreneurs. We've got artists who are entrepreneurs. I mean, it's a really rich. It's a sort of a rich landscape here that I think can be created.
Agreed. Any questions from the floor? Yes. Regional companies to Melbourne. Yeah, okay. So Kate.
Yeah. Second part of the question, regional entrepreneurship. Again, regional entrepreneurs are underrepresented versus the rest of the population. We need to do more to encourage regional entrepreneurship. We have in LaunchVic invested in a number of programs that are changing that in local community. You can't be what you can't see. You need local entrepreneurs to really create that hub and that opportunity for entrepreneurs to come together and think of ideas, test them against each other. So we need more of that. And again, LaunchVic will be having an announcement in the not too distant future about more regional hubs. In terms of how we help companies scale, we see that once companies get to a certain stage in venture capital, so you've got institutional play, if you've got a Square Peg, an Airtree, a Blackbird, a Rampersand, any one of the VCs behind you, they're actually really well placed to help you on the journey. Probably better placed than government is in many ways, except for a big shout out to Gnu and her team at Global Vic, who do a phenomenal job of helping our best and brightest companies export overseas. So I think the big challenge is the really early stage in helping people stick at it. Once you've got your Series A, you actually tend to have enough people wrapped around you. If you've got to Series A and you haven't got enough people wrapped around you, there's a problem there, but generally the Series A investors are institutional and their job is to just get as many great minds around your company as they can, whether that's board members, mentors, helping you identify the right talent. And that goes to building a mature venture capital system, which wasn't here 10 years ago, but we have some great VCs in Victoria who do a phenomenal job of helping companies scale. But the gap at the moment is that really, it's the idea to Series A is where the problem really lies.
So we really need a media platform, don't we, that you can go, right.
I also think, to your point, I agree to some degree. However, particularly in tech, a lot of it is regulatory and political. And so knowing that your local government has a stance in relation to fintech or tech in its environment and R&Ds, like it's beyond just that piece, right? It's all governmental as well. And I think with my first question around regional, I probably didn't place it down well enough. Like there are organisations starting nationally in regional areas that don't have the support of a network. Like there are businesses that would move here if they knew the incentives were here and the support was right. So I think it's kind of twofold, but as a Series A, I'll disagree with you that like Airtree and all these companies, Square Tech and like they're great, but there's also a political alignment and we're relying on our local government for that. And by all means, come and grab me after, because there are certainly companies, and I should preface this, once you get Series A, the hard yards really begin. Like people say, oh, everything happens in the university, it's about translating, and all the hard work's done in the university. Then it's about growing, that's the really hard work. Then you get to Series A, actually that's where the hard work begins. And then you get to Series B, and oh my God, it's even harder because you've suddenly got to scale. So there's always a problem that you've got to get over. So I don't want to make it sound easy. There are also companies that do have to deal with regulatory environments, and where regulatory environments are involved, it's often quite specific to the startup, and that can be a real roadblock. And there are lots of great ideas that do get jammed because they're facing regulation. Fintech and medtech are two areas where that is a real challenge, and we see a lot of companies with that. So have a chat to me, and I'll see what I can do.
So you two get together after this.
Just on the regional point, I think we're having this conversation maybe in 2 or 3 years' time. It might be a very different conversation because I think historically to be a startup you had to be in the CBD, and then the CBD disbanded. We all went remote. Some very smart people have moved to those regional areas, whether it's Geelong, Bendigo, Ballarat, or further out. And I think we're going to see some thriving hubs start to pop up as people realise that the lifestyle 2 hours out of Melbourne or 1 hour out of Melbourne is as good or better than what they were getting in the CBD. They've got everything and they've got great people around them.
Yeah. Okay, so what I'm going to suggest is, so we're going to wind this up. I'm going to say thank you, Kate, very much, and Matt, Christine, and Docs. We really appreciate. We're probably going to hang around for a little while. So if you want to have a conversation with anyone, please go ahead. In particular, I want to thank Gnu Sebest. I'm just trying to find Gnu. I'm not sure if she's still here, but if not, hopefully she'll be passed on. Tim, if you wouldn't mind. No problem. And Tim Sullivan from Global Vic, they've been brilliant at helping us get the grid off the ground. If it wasn't for the state support, then we wouldn't be here. So I appreciate it very much. All the sponsors up here, everyone is really, so Global Vic, as I've said, at 9 Fed Square, Netwealth, thank you, Matt, AGL and the SAYS Group, and thanks to Luke. Thanks to the Grid team, Mads, Reese, the Good One guys, Harry, you've been unbelievable. The Grid is the brand, I believe, if we do this right, if all of us get behind what the Grid could be, it could become the brand that defines our new economy. I hope it helps define who and what our city is to the world. Ultimately, I want people to say, geez, have you been to the Grid? And as a result, they say that is one of the great festivals of business in the world, which then helps us define our place in the world. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to create a media platform for the Grid. So people are able to send their press release about what it is they're up to and start a conversation about their business. There needs to be a central place that people can go to have the conversation about all the great things that are going on, make the connections, find the talent and find the money. So you have a commitment here. We're going to make some sort of media portal happen. So I think it's going to be a blog, I don't know, but we'll make it happen as quickly as we possibly can. Thanks everyone for coming along. I sincerely appreciate your time.